says, why African Americans specifically tend to be one of the convicted ones convicted of the crime of pimping or human trafficking. Michelle Alexander, in her address to the University of Chicago, proposes that this trend of incarceration is reflective of a system of racial and social control that relegates poor people of color into a permanent second-class status. Her argument is that there are certain spaces where certain communities defined largely by race and class are put forth in one way, the way that the majority wants them to be put. This has already been seen with the pimp, who is defined largely and quite negatively as society wants him to be. Richard Cohen, a political writer, argues that the differentiation of attitudes happens to certain like these as well, but in different ways. He argues that a single cause explanation is put forth with the ghetto inhabitant who shoots someone, which Michelle Alexander would extend to be the by and large poor people of color. Whereas multiplicity of excuses are given to the white farm worker suffering from debt and recession who shoots someone. He argues that in the latter, it is the extenuating circumstances that are put to blame for his action rather than his character. Whereas the former, it is his inherent character as a person rather than extenuating circumstances. Alexander would this to say that what people think of poor people of color with relation to high rates of gun violence evidence in the population is that they are just plain violent. No one seems to make understood the fact that instead of having good schools, good jobs, a number of educational opportunities, these communities have brand new high-tech prisons. It is almost as if the way the space and dialogue around these communities are constructed, there are no other route than to prison. I wonder if this is why society blames everything on the poor minority inhabitants' character, to hide the fact that systematically unfair and violent circumstances they are in. And there's more, but I think I just wanted to put that out there.
Well,
layers to the question that you're asking. At the end thing he said, for somebody who doesn't want to be in trafficking, there's layers. Are you dealing with an individual? Well, let me say it like this. When I was in university, UNLV, they asked, what would you, because I told them that it's free to say anything, right, to me. So they asked me, what would you do if your daughter wanted to be a prostitute? What would you do? I said, of course, as a father, I wouldn't want my daughter to be a prostitute. But because I've been in a life, and I've had girls, women, that were with me, who wanted to be with me, and their parents couldn't stop them. So now I have a different understanding. So now I'm gonna have to sit her down, understanding that this is, I'm not gonna be able to stop this girl. So there's different layers. Are you talking to somebody who is being forced into it? Somebody who wants to do it, whether she has a quote unquote pimp or human trafficker? Somebody who is trafficking herself? There's different layers to that. It's not just one. There's so many different layers. This is what I'm talking about. There's so many people that are in the human trafficking quote unquote business to try to help people, but they'll make a statement like that, and there's a whole layer that they'll never understand.
So that's really helpful. So that's very helpful just to understand that there's layers. Robert was helpful in giving us comments about a resource that if I suspect something, you're challenging me to think more broadly about it's not as simple as just asking the question. And Noelle, you had a response for us?
Yeah, so the way we're doing things right now in Seattle is there's a number of advocates who are specifically that work with youth who are being are suspected of being trafficked or suspected of being in the life or something like that. And that could come from a probation counselor, that could come from any community person who they're working with. And what happens is they make a referral, and then one of the advocates goes out and meets with that youth and starts a relationship with that youth. And through that relationship, the hope is to either help them figure out what's going on, and if they are addicted to a pimp, help them break that addiction and help them understand that really it's emotional kidnapping is what pimping is, and help them understand that they've been emotionally kidnapped. They think they're in love, is what they think. They think they're in love, they're kids. and they think they're in love with this man, and they don't want to leave the man. And so we got to break that down for them. We got to help them understand that you know what you are to that man? You're a trick to that man. You're nothing more than a trick to that man because he's using you, he doesn't love you. That's not the way love works. We have to get in their head, just like he does. And that's what we do, and that's what we're doing in Seattle right now with the youth. There's a number of there's an advocate sitting in here. There's a number of PO sitting in here that's made referrals. And so that's what we're doing right now with the youth. And what we have found is the women who are involved in the life, as we call it, we have many, many women who are still in the life who come to our organization 2 to 3 times a week to come to support groups. Are they coming because they're happy with their life? No, they're coming because they want something different. And it might take a long time to get them, to get their self-esteem back, to get them into some kind of schooling, into some kind of job training, something like that, so they can move on. But they're coming for a reason. They're not coming because to waste their time. They could be out making money, right? So we're meeting them where they're at is what we're doing. And it's the best we can do.
Let me respond to that. She's right, but let me say something. Because I don't want, since I believe everybody is really sincere and purposeful in helping this situation. So let me say this, because I don't want us to miss the point, because everything is focused around somebody's connection with a pimp, all right? The new phenomenon today, is without a pimp. These are girls out there that want to go get some money, that want to feed themselves, that want to go buy nice things, regardless if there's a pimp around or not. So if you're trying to address this individual that's not thinking about a pimp, that's out there hustling on their own, then you can't approach that individual saying that you need to disconnect yourself from the pimp, because they're not thinking about a pimp.
That wasn't the question.
But I need to put the information out there.
But let me just say, I think what we need to be mindful of is there's a lot of different dynamics, and I think what Noelle is sharing is that there are people who are seeking support and to get out. And Andre, what I'm hearing from you is that we need to be mindful that there's other things that bring people to this, and if we're talking about
Can I say it simply? Not all prostitution is trafficking.
yes, that's a great way of saying it. Thank you. That's a great way of saying
But
it.
can he finish answering the question in regards to what he would do? He was talking about his daughter, and he was talking about someone that wanted to be in the life. Because as a probation counselor, I deal with youth that it's a fight, as Noelle said. So you try to get someone to get close to them and to work with them. But I really, from someone who has been pimping in his life and has turned his life around, I would really like to hear what he would do if his daughter got in that life.
Sure. So let me do this. Andre, you pass the mic back to me because you'd finished. You hold on to that. So we've got 2 questions going. So we still want to hear the part B of your answer. Okay. I do want to be mindful. Steve, thank you so much for that distinction.
Yeah, 50% or 45% of the girls that are trafficked in this country are black girls. Why is that?
In the country?
Yes, that's what I read actually from FBI. And also I got information from OPS. It's about the same amount here in Washington State in a study that she did. Deborah Boyer from OPS did when she was studying the impact of sex trafficking on people of color, and found that a disproportionate number were black girls. And I want to know why that is.
There's definitely a disproportionate number of victims of sex trafficking from all minority groups.
Yes, but I'm asking specifically for black girls.
So it all comes back to vulnerabilities, right? When someone is looking to get recruited, and it doesn't matter what your skin color is, you get recruited because you're vulnerable, right? Because when a pimp is, I was talking to a pimp after a case, and he was being debriefed because he had pled, and I asked him, so how did you recruit girls? He said, I just go to the mall, and I'd walk around the mall, and find a girl that I thought looked nice, that might make some money for me, and I'd just come up to her and say, you have the most beautiful eyes. And if she looked right back at me and said, well, thank you very much, I'd move on. But if instead she looked down at the ground and said, no, I don't, he'd like, I can get that one. So it comes back to vulnerabilities, and that crosses cultures. There may be commonalities between cultures, there may be certain things unique to one culture or another. I mean, I don't know that there's a single answer to your question. There's no question, there is disproportional.
I'm happy to speak to this because I am not in any way connected to government offices, and so I think that around the political pieces of this might be a little bit more constraining. If you were to line up vulnerability factors for sex trafficking anywhere in the world, they would be homelessness, poverty, and people who are experiencing other forms of violence, sexual violence and domestic abuse. If you took those three measures and lined them up with American society, you would see disproportionately black girls experiencing homelessness, disproportionately black girls experiencing poverty, and disproportionately black girls experiencing domestic violence and sexual assault. So that is a set of things that have been created by structural racism. We've created things where, as you were talking about with the criminal justice element of these, when you have disproportional policing of African American men, you're going to have the instability in the home, and you're going to have men who are exploiting black youth. When you have disproportional punishment in schools of black youth, you're going to see more youth on the streets because they're getting kicked out of school, because they don't have a feeling that they're going to graduate and have those promising things, even though African American women, #1 in the country for higher education achievement, right? That's an incredible thing. Proportionately, black women are graduating from college better than any other group in the country, at the same time that they're experiencing more sexual assault as children, more domestic violence, more homelessness, and more poverty. And so when you're looking at who is going to be preyed upon by the people who are vulnerable, it's going to be that group. And I can say, even from our own numbers here in King County, for youth who've been referred to services, African American youth represent 7 to 8% of the population here. They're at 26%, and if you add mixed race youth, which includes African American and then Hispanic, but non-Hispanic mixed race youth, you're over 50% of the youth who are being referred to services like Noelle's. So communities of color are more than half. I mean, the math doesn't add up. We're a 70% white community here, and it's communities of color, and it's because it's these other factors that are lining up to make people more vulnerable in the first place.
But let me just say this, right? There's something that interjected into what we call the pimp life that wasn't there 20, 30 years ago. And that's the element of gangs that have infiltrated the subculture of the pimp life. There were rules, there were laws, there were taboos against underage women, underage girls. That's a great taboo, right? To the point that people would want to do something to you. You know, like if you go to prison for that, they'll try to kill you, right? So it was like that on the streets. But now things have shifted over the last 20 years because it has become gang infiltrated. There's no rules, there are no laws, nobody cares. And there are violent individuals now controlled by gangs that, quote unquote, the average pimps are afraid of and don't want to have nothing to do with. So a lot of things you're seeing now in the country are coming from a gang mentality, right? So if I'm trying, you can't really talk to the police and tell them the difference because they just throw everything all in one big pile because everybody's the villain, right? But I'm explaining because I know, because I still, even though my life is reformed and I'm doing things for the community, I still have to keep a connection to the streets because I can't always see brothers that are considered pimps as, I can't see them as evil because I was there. Malcolm X was a pimp before, right? So I have to see them as a person that is in situations that can be helped because I'm helped. So
you have young women who are in a cycle of making bad decisions that are harmful to themselves, right? And you don't want to lock them up. But what are other options? I mean, when we talk mental health, There's actually, I mean, we can put somebody in a 72-hour hold if we think something's wrong out here. You can't do that kind of thing for these young ladies. Something like it might be useful, I don't know, but when the options are, well, you're either in jail or you can go to this program that you can walk away from any time. Right? That's tough, right? There's no good middle solution right now.
A human trafficker has pretty much no connection to the women. They're just there to be used, put the clients. But in a pimp relationship, whole relationship, there's relationship. I have 2 children from women that were with me, and we're still the best of friends to this day. And there's a lot of guys that I know that I'm not saying that it's right. I just want to explain to you the difference, right? So that if you want to fix the situation, you can go in with some information, right? But if you lump everything together, you'll never really understand because you don't really want to understand. So when she's talking about the addiction, she's just talking about what love was. What was considered love in the relationship, right? They could call it what they want to call it, but there's actually, okay, to give you a perfect illustration, an individual like I was in that lifestyle, we did not put the same type of criteria on sex that the average person does, right? We put a different criteria on coming up, right? Yes, the world looked at us like we were this, that, and the other. It didn't matter because this is what we chose to do in our subculture, with our language, with our rules, with our guidelines, and we decided that we was going to be together doing it, right? So that's what we did. So the human trafficker, they don't have any of that. They don't care about this woman. Now, there are situations that there are men out there that are extremely abusive. Whether you're a pimp, a doctor, a lawyer, whatever, abuse happens with men. But it's easy to put the Willie Horton face to a black guy and give him 300 or 100 years, which they're given to these guys today. But this politician on April 27th, Dennis Hars, whatever, yeah, molesting little boys, got 15 months because most molestation or that type of crime is done by white men. You want to stop this? Well, then make sure that the Johns get as much time as what you're trying to give these pimps, and I guarantee you'll stop it overnight.